Hello and welcome to a buildingSMART webinar. Thank you for joining. My name is Sheila Karai-Lum and I will be your moderator today. The webinar is hosted by the Regulatory Room and is part of the Open House series. Today's webinar is titled Towards Automated Building Compliance. Our speakers are Nicholas Nisbet, Director at AEC3 Limited, and Franco Coyne, Digital Consultant at buildingSMART Italy. This webinar is scheduled to last 1 to 1.5 hours with a Q&A at the end. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available in due course. Before I hand over to our speakers, I would like to remind you that your lines will remain muted for the duration of the presentations. If you have any questions or wish to make comments, please use the chat function located within the control panel. I would also like to bring to your attention that buildingSMART is committed to ensuring that participation in the development of standards is unrestricted and the process for their adoption is transparent, and standards that are developed do not favour any particular provider and are open, non-binding and accessible to all. Please take note of our antitrust code of conduct on the screen. And now I would like to hand over to Nick to start the presentation.
Okay, welcome everyone. This is the second open house that the Regulatory Room has provided. And what we'd like to do today is to offer an introduction to how open standards are accelerating progress towards automated building compliance. And we'll start by looking at some of the challenges faced by designers and regulators, and how building information models can actually improve the process and ultimately make the process simpler and more accurate. As you've heard, I'm a director at AEC3, and I'm also the leader of the Regulatory Room within buildingSMART. The Regulatory Room is an open forum for the discussion of issues, particularly around standards and how they impact the relationship between the design engineering community and the regulatory community. Our charter is to encourage the development and adoption of digital data interoperability based on open standards, sometimes called openBIM, to help re-engineer the process. This is important because regulatory approval processes are a major source of delay and risk to projects worldwide. I think the statistics from the IFC, the International Finance Corporation, shows that this can be often a matter of months in some countries around the world. And so we're very interested in the process. Okay. Sorry about that. Yes. So to start at the very beginning, what does digital transformation offer us? I think the first benefit that we are looking for, whether we are designers and engineers and construction specialists, or whether we're in the regulation side, is efficiency. That we can eliminate a lot of the transcription and printing and processes that don't add value. More importantly, I think, is that we can get accuracy. We can actually make sure that we track our decisions and we track the information on which we base those decisions. I think the third key benefit is that an efficient and accurate process allows staff on both sides of the fence to focus on their core skills, whether it's design or whether it's site inspection, or those activities, and actually can relieve some of the administrative burden that comes with the processes. If we can do that, we can achieve greater transparency because the rules can be seen to be being obeyed. They can, the decisions are traceable, and we can build up a body of knowledge about how the process is working. And last of all, it is about data sharing. It's about saying that the information that the engineers and designers have access to can be the same information that the regulators use to make their assessments and so on. And in some cases, that can follow through into the transparency of the democratic processes, open government, and so on and so forth. So there's a strong case for digital transformation to move beyond the working within the professional and construction environment and saying that it should join together with the government processes in order to benefit the economy overall and benefit society that is looking for better buildings. Okay. How can we start this process of moving towards the digital transformation of the relationship between the supply side and the demand side in the regulatory process? I think the first step, which we'll look at in a moment, is about understanding that there are open standards for BIM, and in particular the IFC, which I'll say a bit more about in a moment, and that a lot of the software and technology around open standards are themselves freely available. And that means that people can start to introduce this digital element to their regulatory process with very little initial cost or difficulty. I think the second step is starting to recognize that these building models, this information about building designs, is can be analyzed, can be measured, can be used directly to help answer the questions that regulators want to answer, but also can start to answer questions that may be of interest in a wider context. And I'll talk about safety as one of those areas where information is particularly important. And then the third step is to start thinking about automated rules and automated compliance checking. Now, we'll give some examples and we'll talk about the various approaches that 4 or 5 countries around the world are taking towards that goal. And then when we've shown you those, then we will be very keen to have any of your questions or comments. So if you take a look at the first step, the first step is to start focusing attention on the sharing of data, not documents. This is a challenge because the first steps of the electronic revolution have moved a lot of documents from paper to PDF. And we've had the benefit of fewer trees being cut down, perhaps. We've had the benefit of electronic communication, but it doesn't necessarily have much effect on the actual process that's carried out. So if we look at the opportunity for data in more detail, what we're suggesting is that we can adopt shared international and open standards and tools so that every single information is well defined and can be understood unequivocally by the recipients and people like the grandchildren who aren't involved too closely. We can collect data in a unique shared place, supporting the progressive development of information from early and frequent testing and interrogations. We can move to a position where the information necessary for approvals is accumulated over time rather than necessarily being delivered in one large lump. and then be prepared for future uses. Okay. So yes, sorry, Franco, I'm running away here.
Oh, just some heads, just to tell something. Okay, I've been involved as probably as Sheila said before. I'm working in a regulatory room steering committee, and I'm very involved in data. So let me say something that I think is we have to care about when you start talking about the data instead of PDF documents in the process, in the approval processes. Don't I think that if I were when we did this slide, we were thinking of what would happen to us if we were in the position of starting the process of adopting the digital process for building approval. And the first thing we have to think is availability of free shared tools able to read and view data. So this is something that is very important to focus on, the capability of not only being able to read the data, even if they are all together in a file that is more complex. Second is a common global data dictionary to avoid misunderstanding and disputes. This is a point that has been following the story of buildingSMART for a long period. Now things are getting a lot better because of technology is more is more friendly to use, and we are facing the capability finally to find a global data dictionary. But it's something that in any country, in every country, when you start talking about this process, is a topic you have to talk about and to think about. Pay attention that building information is fully shareable and reusable for team working in all submission processes, not once only. So the idea of data that has to be reused is a key point in starting to project the process for data for building approval. File formats are not submitted to proprietary constraints, avoiding issues related to market events, acquisition, bankruptcies, etc. Okay, this is just to think that many times we have a lot of stories as in my life, because I've been working with data since 30 years. You have the idea that something you are living in a mainstream situation, so things that one kind of format will never stop is not true. Think about many stories that can happen in your life. That's why you have to care about the data in file are readable and intelligible by design along years, and so also by your grandchildren's, and by any tool built with the standard interoperable interface. That means that not only people can be able to read the data inside the file, but also another machine can do that through an interface. Then the answer for all this stuff for us has been IFC, and now back to Nick, that has a lot of story to talk about this format and what's going on and how it was and how it's going to be.
Okay, so we're putting a lot of emphasis on the IFC, and the IFC is a means to capture information about a building or indeed about infrastructure in a form that can be created by most, if not all, of the major design tools, and it can be read by a number of free tools. And so it represents an opportunity to allow regulators access to building information without necessarily having to commit to any proprietary system. On the left here, we have, I've given the logos of 4 systems. Of course, there are many more, and it's growing, all of whom support the IFC schema. And on the other side, for building control officers, authorities having jurisdiction, code compliance departments, and building inspectors, I've just given the logos of a handful of tools that are available to make the IFC information visible, browsable. In some cases, you can use those tools to report off it and get schedules or so on. You can cut sections, you can spin the buildings around, of course, and filter them in all sorts of ways. The information that's in IFC, the information that's in IFC is more than just geometry. In the middle, I've just taken a screenshot from one authoring tool, just to show that this is a very simple two-story car park. And I've highlighted one steel beam, and clearly we can see it's got shape. But around it, we can see that it has a name. It has a class, which is that it's an IFC beam. It is part of an assembly with the fittings that join it to the adjacent columns. It has a definite position and orientation in 3D space. It has a specific material associated to it, which is the grade of steel. And it has properties such as load bearing and quantities such as the volume and mass of the item. So the IFC is not just about transmitting 3D shape, and in fact, you don't necessarily have to have the 3D shape. It's actually transmitting information about real things, beams, rather than lines and arcs and text. And because it's about real things, it also comes with all sorts of relationships, such as this beam is on the upper story of this building. It is connected to the columns and to the slabs. It can have information, all sorts of relationships. And so actually within an IFC file, you can have a complete description, not only of the physical things, but also the spaces. Here, there may be, you can't see it, but there will be a number of spaces for each car parking place. There'll be spaces for the ramps and so on. And so an IFC model represents both the physical reality of the proposal or actual building, but also how space is going to be used. And that's often critical in the regulatory process. We're not only regulating the physical aspects of the building, but also the relationship between those spaces. Okay.
Okay. Back to the story. One of the questions that we have had in the past was how is the people thinking? Is the people thinking that this new change can work? Is it something that is coming? Is it something it's just a dream? And so in 2021, we did as a regulatory room, we decided to run a global survey. And the outcomes have been very encouraging because 75% of professionals that we get in contact, they were coming from 36 countries all around the world. And you can see in the image, you can see that the colors is darkest, is darker where the more of them were coming from. We did this in 5 languages, so no way. So we had. This is why we have so some people not from some countries, but 75% of them declared they are discussing the use of BIM in building regulatory. So this means that in many countries the discussion is open, and more than 70% of them want to use and IFC and openBIM tools to manage this change. So the very majority of the highest majority of the professionals we asked are going to use IFC, and the large majority of survey attendants are moderately positive on the success of openBIM for building regulatory. That's a very interesting point of view. Of course, it depends what moderators say, of course, and we are here with you, and we'd like very much from your questions and your ideas to understand how strong is this moderate positive real. Let's move to the step 2. That is about analytics, because many times we talk about that independence, accuracy, and veracity in a building approval process is something that everybody wants. Of course, it's not something. It's not something that is. We can discuss this, but is clear. But the real problem we have been facing is that each one has a different approach, different concerns when you start moving to with the process. And so during the project, you can find people that is worried about, I don't know, they can have different ideas because of their role. So technical professional can be more positive on the use of technology, while the owners or the politicians are less positive about that, more scared about. You can face problems about the knowledge about the new tools, the awareness of the new tools. And on the other side, you have also psychological aspects, like a large a number of worries related to costs or to complexity of the new process. What we found, what we have experienced, and also in the examples that Nick will explain later, we find that analytics has been the great solution for managing the discussion, then convince the people that is not on your side, or the capability of making the results evident. And so, Nick, let's go to the story, to what is going on in this area, and you can tell us what's happening in UK.
Okay, just 2 examples of the idea that building information is a resource that can be analyzed. Of course, in a minute or 2, we'll talk about regulatory analysis, but there are 2 projects in the UK which show that the information about buildings can play a wider role, which government and is taking a particular interest in. The first project I'd like to mention is Discovering Safety, which is being sponsored by the insurance company Lloyd's of London. And there's a detailed series of work packages and studies looking to use IFC building information and past accident records to identify where risks may occur. And this involves implementing standards for risk recording and looking for those correlations between the activities, the locations, and the physical products that make up a building and the accident and record, and where possible, near misses. And that's starting to build into a body of knowledge, including suggestions for mitigating risks, drawn from past practice and best practice recommendations. Another aspect, some of you will be aware of the dreadful fire that we had in the UK for a residential tower block. And we are now getting ready to think about how we manage that. How do we check for risk management, for life safety measures, and proper record keeping? And little by little, we are edging towards the idea that a well-structured building information can be linked to the risks that we're concerned about. And that information can also be linked to the documents and contacts and other evidence that can justify the claim that a building is as safe as reasonably possible. So the challenge in both of these is that once we have the right building information, we can start to think about how society can benefit from these analysis, this kind of analysis, and actually take control of the trends that are affecting the industry. So the diagram just shows that in both cases, discovering safety and in the golden thread thinking, we wrap the description of the building with risks and documents and evidence, and we then have something that can be managed actively. Okay. Okay, so now we can think about step 3 towards automated rules and automated compliance checking. I think many of you will have seen the BIM handbook, which Chuck Eastman and his colleagues have published various editions of. And in that, the goal of automated compliance checking has always been the last chapter, the ultimate aim. And I think that's right in a way, because if building information can be used for regulatory compliance, then it's being used by people not within our industry. And so it's obviously represents probably the pinnacle of maturity that BIM may aspire to. There have been many much academic work on this, and some practical applications of it. But I think we can report that these efforts are reaching a consensus on how it can be done, and that it can be done now. So if we look at some examples, these are, I apologize if your favorite automated compliance checking project isn't on the screen here. I just picked out a few that I think are particularly significant. With the purple image, that's an image taken from the Singapore E-Plan check system, which was developed around the year 2000. And it was pioneering in many ways, including probably the first web-based online viewer for building models. It was built around the IFC, and it showed that large parts of the building code, even then, particularly around architecture, zoning, civil defense, and spatial matters, could be checked systematically. About the same time, in Finland, Salivi was being launched as a model checking tool, a desktop tool. And the top left-hand image shows that Salivi has, for a long time, offered a set of rules which allows both information checking and practical geometric checks about buildings. And in fact, when we did the Smart Codes project in the USA, we were able to reconfigure Salivi to read regulations directly. And with an adapter, we were able to load rules into Salivi from any jurisdiction when we needed to. I should then mention the top right-hand corner image, which is from Estonia, where BIM-based checking based on open standards is imminent. It's been trialed for a number of years. What you can see here is that escape distances have been checked on this apartment block. And you can see highlighted in red that there are some areas where it's been detected that it's not within the fire regulations are not being satisfied. And that system is imminently going to be moved to a live basis. The last one I'd mention is in the UK, and it's a development of the Smart Codes project in the USA. And we are actively linking the text of the approved documents in the UK, the recommended guidance for building compliance. And we're directly linking those to automated checking, also generating checklists and other reports and what we will be showing with the DCOM Digital Compliance Project is a number of online services, one hosting the regulations, one hosting the BIM models, one hosting the results from various projects, and other services like energy models. We'll also be asking Salivi to help with some of the geometric problems. And this network of services will come together to make an automated compliance system where lots of different people can contribute and offer services in order to make an ecosystem of checking available. And we hope to be reporting those results in a few months' time. Okay. So these are the things that we think are important, and the 3 steps that we think that organizations can take. Just to recap, first of all, to accept IFC models as supplementary to the submittal process, so as to help understand applications, and start the shift from PDFs and electronic drawings to using IFC. Secondly, using those models to answer specific questions like distances, or to measure areas, or to check angles, or whatever it happens to be. And then thirdly, we will do the 3rd step where we can start to put automated rules in place for the majority of the regulations that affect buildings. And some of them are geometric, some of them are driven by the presence of materials or whatever, and some of them are simple declarations that things have been considered and so on. So we think that the role of open standards is central to opening up this conversation. But we'd really like to hear if anyone has any thoughts or comments on this. And so we're sitting and hoping that you'll have some thoughts on this.
Oh, okay, Nick, just waiting for questions and for somebody who wants to speak, to talk. I just want to talk of something. Something is going in Italy about the capability or the interest in IFC for using for archiving the data. As you know, probably Italy has a heritage, a number of assets with a high heritage value. And so we are starting to try to put them on a database, or not, we have a database, but we of course need to manage them in a real database. And one of the big issues is how many old chapels has problems with the roof and the water is falling down and or things like that. And this is easy if you have only one chapel in your city, but if you have thousands of them around, many of them spread around in the mountains or in the small villages, this question is not so easy to answer. And also archiving this, the capability of archiving this data, and ask to the database how many chapels, where are the chapels with the problems in the roof, or with a kind of roof that can be a problem in the future, is a fantastic fantastic gaining in the use of IFC in managing that for for managing the built assets. So this is one of the things that you can use, or things that you can do in the future if you are thinking to use this kind of data. But this passed through a very, very essential point, that is, you have to use this data for approval, because everything. This is the only way you have to have all the buildings submitted to the same process, and so all the buildings that are intelligible in the future, and their data can be used for managing them in a better way.
Yeah, and I think at our last Standard Summit, we heard from the Chilean government, where they were using not a regulatory process, but an approvals process around social housing. That they were using IFC to review and approve funding for social housing projects. And that was central to how they were going about things, because it was effectively for them a low-cost solution for gathering a lot of information about projects that private sector was offering.
Okay.
Okay, so we have some questions.
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Are there any countries where it is mandatory to use some particular system for checking IFC models for purpose of building permit? I think the choice of the software to do this is usually open. I think each country has its own regulations. Now, so there are many systems in development. I'm particularly interested in developing systems which are independent of the regulations, so different regulations can be fed into them, and so on. But I think it's the regulatory bodies will choose systems that are trustworthy, that they have confidence in. I mean, in Singapore, applicants were allowed to use the same software as the regulators were to test their designs beforehand. I think that's a very open way of doing it, and so on. But it is relatively rare for a country to mandate proprietary software. I think that's an important point, that especially governments are very reluctant to hand a monopoly. And so on. So we have to continue to look for open systems and open solutions.
Okay. There is a second one about, as a client, how can we best specify IFC data as a requirement to ensure the delivery team deliver correctly structured information for specific purpose, such as regulatory approval? Oh, this is a very good question. I can also read all the rest. All too often we see requests for IFC files and the delivery team simply export using default software settings without understanding what they are delivering. This is a very good question, and let us introduce the RIR project.
Yeah.
That is a real good issue. No, it's not a good issue. It's an issue, but we are looking for a solution. RIR project, that is regulatory information requirements, is something related to specify in the IFC format which are the requirements for the regulatory activities, for regulatory process. Of course, we are not so crazy to think that we can find all the information for every country, for everything, but we are in this moment approaching the process in a very structured way, and introducing the mandatory data for regulatory requirements that are needed in the process, not only for approval, but also for the following steps that are related to the first approval. Because of course we have to think that the great value that comes from an IFC file, from IFC data, is to be able to manage the data after the approval, and to manage their change as soon as they come, and then as soon as they continue in time after time. I don't know, Nick, do you want to add something?
Well, yes. I mean, I think Finland has probably led the way in publishing standards. Some of which are, I'm afraid, in Finnish, but some are in English, relating to what information should be in the model. But I think the clue is it should contain the same information as you would previously have provided in the document set that you would provide to the regulatory agencies. And so, the information is there. Yes, people have got to engage with a process. And so that's why we think we should start by sharing IFC models just for information, for background information. And then people will start to learn about what information should be there. We are working on a project, as Franco said, called the Regulatory Information Requirements Project. And we're inviting any country that has an interest to come forward and work with us so that we can extend the international standard that is IFC with those things that are in common. There are some things that are obvious and probably universal across all regulatory systems, that they depend a lot on the building type, they depend a lot on the number of stories, they depend a lot on the number of occupants and so on. And we can make sure there are common standards for conveying that information, even where countries then use that information in their regulations in different ways. So we think we can help with that. And I think the other way of improving the quality of IFC files is to use the free viewers so that people can be aware of what information is in the model and they can see the quality of it. So an IFC file on a disk is not particularly interesting. An IFC file seen in a viewer or an analysis program will be very quick to tell you if there's information missing.
Okay, Nick, there is another question from Cindy Baldwin. Thank you. How are you dealing with the liability issue of auto-checking? Have you any idea at the moment? We know that we are discussing something with the lowest BIM about this. We have some stories, but not about what about the auto-checking specifically? Do you have any?
Well, I think it's well understood now, and all the systems I've mentioned will explain their decision making. There will be a log, an evidence, a summary of what factors have been taken into account in reaching a decision. And so I think liability is, it's not changed, but the chances of making a mistake are reduced. And anyone can review the explanation that's given for a point of failure or even a point of passing, and so on. So I think the rigor that comes into automated code compliance is actually a good answer to the problems of liability. The other reason for using open standards is because then many people can produce solutions, and the quality checks can be tested against each other as much as against human equivalents. I think there's a realization around the world that actually checking processes are very prone to error. I've had building compliance officers who just say, well, we just look at the name of the designer and we know what kinds of mistakes that designer is likely to make. Or in the Autocodes project, which was conducted in the US, the same building was given to 8 or 9 different jurisdictions to check. And they all found different issues, but none of them spotted that the fire escapes didn't go anywhere. And so we have to acknowledge that the manual process is not that great. And you know, these people tasked with it deserve help and tools, and the industry deserves tools to help them get it right quicker.
Okay, we have a lot of questions now.
Good. Oh, good.
We have
Sorry.
to pay attention, not to talk too much, too long. Okay, will the slides be available for download? For sure. Yes, it's sure. And
well, the movie will be, the video recording will be made available.
Yeah. So, and in case we can, you can find at the end where a slide, a link where you can ask for that, for a special file if you need it. Okay, the question was about Cindy Baldwin. Miss Cindy Baldwin was about the continuing the question about liability. It was a licensed engineer must sign off for approval with building department. Yes, that is something that is absolutely included in the data that we are facing and we are managing and want to introduce inside the AFC format. What is the role of the regulatory room in moving this work forward? Nick, you are the boss, so please.
Well, I think, as I hinted at the beginning, the regulatory room is an open forum to discuss these issues. We regularly look around the world at activities. We have some of the world's leading experts contributing and writing reports. We've looked at open standards for regulations as opposed to open standards for buildings. We've looked at the economic case for automated code compliance. The 3 steps that we've outlined today came from a report on the electronic permitting process that was written originally by our Japanese delegate Masaki Muto. And so, yes, we're a forum for discussing these things. We're also a channel for creating projects which will improve the buildingSMART standards, including IFC and others. And so that's why the Regulatory Information Requirements Project is particularly important, because what we want to do is to make sure that the IFC schema, which is an ISO standard, the next release will include the majority of the information that might be needed. So we have these open houses. We have a number of conferences within the Standard Summit. Well, the next Standard Summit will be in March, and all the rooms will be open to discussing the progress we can make. We also have the forums.buildingsmart.org, where anyone can register and raise regulatory type questions, and the community can help answer them. So we're trying very hard to be connected outwards to the demand, and we did the survey, which Franco must be thanked for steering it through. But ultimately, we want to make sure that the international standards support this trend.
Just to add one thing, just one small thing is we are very, very well connected with the chapters in the different countries to promote this. So it's not only the room is not only working at international level, but is doing a lot of stuff in the local level. First of all, gathering information with the chapters, buildingSMART chapters in the different countries. Okay, Nick, there is a question about what they are doing in Germany. Then they're trying to provide a certified set of checking rules based on law and standards. Congrats. That can be used in different software. That's very interesting. It's still on research stage, but the time to start is now. And if you don't research how to do this, you can do it in the future or in time.
Yeah, I think, I mean, one of the key points there is to capture the rules independent of the software that's going to use them. In the early days, in the Singapore system and others, there was a lot of computer code that needed to be written. We're now moving to a stage where that's no longer the case, and that's critical. That if you can have the rules in a form that are human readable and machine readable, then we get the confidence, we get the understanding, we get the feedback to make sure that what the computer is doing is what the human would have done. And I think we've got beyond the research stage, actually. I think this is one of the points that, if there has been a lull in activity since 20 years ago, it's because we've had to make this shift away from ordinary programming to having rules in a form that any software can read. Okay.
Is there any roadmap with the report poll from this regulatory room? Yes,
Yes.
Available. Please, at the end, take note of our email address, and we'll be very, very happy to to forward you our roadmap.
Yeah.
There are countries like Chile that are creating revision software with automatic rules. It is also possible to create this automation with Salivi, but the human factor will always be necessary. How important is to create a standard name for the project's metadata? This is a very good question. Nick, you know a lot about Chile, so please.
Yeah, well, I think the Chilean example is very interesting. I think the Salivi software, which I work with a lot, is very powerful, but it doesn't capture process. It is a how can I put this? It's a toolkit which you can apply to certain problems. And I think most regulatory processes are, in the first instance, they're a management problem that you need to track all the regulations and all the clauses and which have and haven't been passed and so on. And so in different circumstances, you may be able to use Salivi. You may want to have something that's more structured in the way it operates. The human factor is, of course, important because we have a very human system at the moment with all its strengths and weaknesses. If automated code compliance can generate the right results, then I think human attention can really focus on on-site compliance and the larger issues around what we're doing. You know, yes, the point made earlier that there has to be an engineer who signs off the building, and they will probably, even now, they will be acting on reports that have been provided to them by junior members of staff, and so on. And the right to, or the ability to reopen an issue is, of course, there for the humans to do. But what we want to at the very least achieve is a situation where that lead engineer is making a decision whether to approve the plans based on accurate analysis.
Okay, there is another question. Is prevalent issue is that many models do not accurately represent correct dimensions. Visually correct, but incorrect in properties tab, both in authoring tool and IFC. What effort regulatory checking tools take this into consideration? Good question. Is the capability of checking the dimension is related to the control you can manage after you receive the data. Of
yeah,
course,
I think absolutely that it is possible, both with drawings and with BIM models, for the geometry to diverge from the published parameters. So as part of the checking process will always be to make sure there is no such discrepancy. And things like the clear opening width of a door is both a direct property, and it's a formula based on other aspects of the door, and it's also a geometrical fact. And yeah, part of the checking process, or the pre-checking, will always be to make sure that there's no discrepancy. Just as within paper-driven plans, it may be sensible to not believe the dimensions that are written on the drawing, or maybe not to scale from the drawing. There are many things that can be done wrong, but it is all checkable. And so the basic that basic checks whether there is an accidental or deliberate attempt to deceive. That can be done too.
Okay, current ISO 16739 is quite flexible. To make it workable, may need to fix the P steps and create a localized version of if IFC standard for the modelers to create model to mitigate the data loss due to wrong P set properties. Sorry for my English. I get some. my language was my language was thinking in Italian. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, I think we will need to tighten up on the way that we use the property sets. And that's part of the regulatory information requirement project, is to look to see where there are potential discrepancies. And I think the main lesson is that people will learn or discover the benefit of following the IFC standard rather than proprietary variations. And of course, the reward for doing it right is that you get your approval quicker. If the information is in the wrong place in the IFC or absent, then you will soon quickly be told that the outcome is undecided, and so on. So we will have a self-correcting system where people will discover the benefit of sticking to the standards wherever possible.
Okay. This is for you because it's talking about the UK. We see most people in the UK are asking for AFC 2 for free.
Right.
Would you recommend this of IFC 4?
Oh, well, for most purposes in the building sector, IFC 2x3 is fine. What IFC 4 adds predominantly is the ability to represent infrastructure projects, which are in scope, but we haven't discussed them much today. I think there are benefits to moving to IFC 4.3, which will become the ISO standard probably early next year, but it's never quite clear exactly how long that will take. The Singapore system was based on IFC 2x2. IFC 2x3 has been around for 20 years now, I think, nearly 20 years. And so it's not surprising it's the dominant flavor.
Okay. There are no more questions, but if you okay, here comes the very last one. No, this is not the last one. Please go ahead. No problem.
Okay. Will IFC 5 disrupt work done currently using IFC 2x3 or IFC 4.3? Of course, any change. There may be some substantial changes in IFC 5 in mostly relating to simplifying the schema, rationalizing it, tidying it up, making it more compatible with things like the semantic web, more compatible with modern programming tools and so on, but the functionality will still be the same. And so I can't, like any technology, if you wait for the next version, there is always a next version. I think IFC has had a pretty strong track record of gentle compatibility going forward. And I hope when IFC comes, I hope there will be a clear raft of benefits that people will see to say, yes, it is worth making the switch. But there's no timetable at the moment.
Okay. Oh, people start to have to go, so they have.
Okay. Oh, yes. Well.
Okay. Thank you to Nicholas Humes for his appreciations. What to say now? Okay, Nick, we hope that everybody want to share their challenges, and to talk about this. One of the things that we gathered during the the survey is that many times people are very, very happy about IFC and this digital transformation, but the boss aren't. So please challenge your boss, because this is one. Challenge your customers, challenge your regulators, because it's a kind of from this discussion that comes the capability of growing and doing new stuffs and go to the goal. What do you need? Ask us. Join us. For any question or thoughts, please get involved and start writing us to regulatory to our email address, and then Nick, up to you to close the.
Okay. Well, to conclude, thank you for attending. Thank you for our friends in Singapore and Chile for putting up with our sketch of your activities. But I hope that many of you will think how to take this forward. I would say we're all agents for change, wherever we are in the process. We can influence our colleagues, our bosses, our regulators, and so on, to make sure that this stays a vital topic for the industry to move forward. So thanks very much. Thank you to Sheila and Dan for organizing the event, and thanks, Franco, for all your hard work.
Thank you, Nick. That, as usual, you are really a well of knowledge about these themes. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.